Bene, allora riprendiamo alla grande il nostro convegno, che è già iniziato da un'ora con una bellissima discussione sui poster. Now I turn to English because we are welcoming our key speaker and who is really helping us in organizing this event, as Franciscka De Jong. So I repeat what I was saying in Italian before. The Congress has started at 9 o'clock with the discussion of the papers, of the posters, and there was a really good discussion in 4 rooms, and I hope that the same discussion will be next morning after the poster session of this afternoon. Now is the time of the second keynote that will be made by Franciscka De Jong. And so I present her, and in presenting her, I thank you. I really thank you, Franciscka, and of course, CLARIN, Eric, for all the help. That is not only a logistic help, is not only a technical help, but they really has made us understand how to manage this Congress in a not traditional way, because when we decided to go online, we realized that it was impossible to replicate a traditional Congress online. This was not a choice, but which other choices we had? Okay, CLARIN gave us a solution, and we took this solution, we transformed a little bit this solution, and this is working really well. So I present Franciscka. Franciscka is has been since 2015 the executive director of CLARIN Eric. CLARIN, as now everyone knows, is a common language resources and technologies infrastructure. She studied at Utrecht University, and she did a PhD in theoretical linguistics. Now her many research interests are in the field of text mining, cross-language retrieval, the disclosure of cultural heritage collection, in particular spoken audio archives, and e-research at large. Next to her position at CLARIN, she is a full professor of e-research for the humanities at Utrecht University. She also a member of the board of the Netherlands E-Science Center, the EOSC, I don't know if the pronounce is correct, Hub Project Management Board, and the Executive Board of ERIC Forum. She was also a co-chair in the DH 2019 conference in Utrecht. So it's only a short view of a very large curriculum that I saw in online, and actually I've been told about Franciscka a lot, and so I am very happy to give her the microphone and ask her to make her keynote speech. Thank you very much, Franciscka.
We didn't do an audio check. I hope it's working. Can you hear me?
Yes, it does.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Enrica, for this nice introduction. Let me first say one thing about the support that CLARIN, and in particular David and Maria, have been giving to the organization and the logistics of this event. Because the fact that I'm doing this keynote and this support activity are could be seen as sort of sponsored, the request of a sponsor, but actually the two things are totally independent. We would have been pleased to do the support without this keynote, and this keynote I would have been glad to do without the support from my own colleagues. But nevertheless, it's very nice to see that the collaboration between CLARIN Italy and CLARIN ERIC can lead to a fast learning curve for all of us in how to organize these events that are unavoidable, unfortunately, these days, but also bring a lot of new elements that we're actually glad about. One thing is that these events attract many more people than the traditional face-to-face events, because it's much more affordable for a bigger group. So let's celebrate this one as with all the constraints that made it being arranged in this way, but let's celebrate it for the content and the fact that many people will be able to participate. I will now share my screen.
You should be able to.
Yes. I suppose it's there now on your side as well.
All good.
Okay, thank you very much. When I got the invitation to give a keynote at this conference, I realized that many people would be informed about CLARIN, but not everybody at the same level of detail, of course, and that I should best use the opportunity to show what CLARIN can do, and in particular what CLARIN can do under the framework of open science, which is having one important agenda item, namely making sure that data sets, research data, resources are available according to the principles of fair data. So hence the simple explanation for the title. I hope that after my talk you have a better understanding of how CLARIN is able to support researchers that make use of language data in accordance with the principles of fair data, and how this also connects to the open science agenda at large. I was looking at the call text for your conference, and was interested by the or reflected a little bit on what is written in the text in the introductory sentence about the fact that the role of scholars in relation to the dynamics in society is the role of a silent protagonist, which may indeed be true for scholars from the digital humanities, but is in some sense also true, but there's more to say about it, but it's maybe also true for most researchers, because we're living in a world that is partly shaped by the results and the outcomes of scholarly and scientific work anyhow. And the researchers are, of course, not the ones that are often being thanked for that. And of course, and they don't need to be thanked for that, because they have been paid to do their work and to contribute to their discipline. But it's unavoidable that interesting results and insights and knowledge percolate to society and play a role in all dynamics there. Of course, this role is accelerated by the emergence of information technology. So it's good to reflect on how this silent role is taking shape. So I think the topic for this conference was very well chosen. And I've tried in my talk to give, of course, lots of matter-of-fact information about CLARIN, but to couple it to how that can help serving scholars to play that role. So I will split up my talk in 4 parts. One is about this role for digital humanists for society and the way fair data plays a role there. Then a bird's eye view of the way the CLARIN infrastructure and in particular the services have been organized. Then a few examples that demonstrate the potential for societal impact in DH work from the perspective of CLARIN, and some concluding remarks. So, digital humanities for society. I think I already mentioned the open science agenda as the starting point for, or at least a very big factor in the emergence of the fair data principles. I will come back to what that means later on. I think the open science agenda was partly meant to stimulate the role of researchers as protagonists in societal and economic innovation. It started with a lot of debate about the fact that investments in research based on public funding should benefit society at large, and not benefit commercial parties such as publishers or companies that use the results without taking into account that it was all that the knowledge and the tools and the data and what have you were created with public money. And of course, this all was heavily influenced by the digital turn. And now that we see with the advent of huge amounts of data and artificial intelligence as applications for all the data resources that are available, that another discussion is also coming up, namely that researchers should not adopt the principles of open science in terms of recognition of the public funding, but should also apply principles, the principles of responsible data, of responsible data science, with recognition of the context of data, the diversity of the humans and the cultural and societal phenomena that are reflected in data. So the topics that I think the subtopics of your conference that are closely related to the services that CLARIN is offering are listed here again. I will get back to them later on. But I would like to delve a little bit deeper into the 3 aspects that the 3 pillars of the open science agenda, namely open access, open source, and open data, because we can learn something from how they came about and some of the concerns and dynamics around them. So first of all, open access. You see here the icon that I think is familiar to all researchers that is connected to it, to the movement, because it's often seen as a requirement from funders, something that makes life of researchers difficult, but actually it started as a movement that was driven by, or that was initiated by researchers who felt that their intellectual output should not be the material for commercial companies to make a fortune or to benefit without recognition of the public funding of lots of the publications. So this was with a lot of people with roots in research. The so-called Berlin Declaration of Open Access to Knowledge in the Science and Humanities was formulated in 2003. Since then, a lot has happened with the open access to journal publications and other forms of open access platforms to publications. But I would like to present this here or to underline here that this was a movement that started from the interest of researchers rather than from funding organizations or department heads, etc. Before the open access movement, there was already a movement focusing on open source an open source status for software, all to encourage the reuse of software and the wider distribution and incorporation of knowledge and expertise from developers, which also led to a declaration in 1998 already. And a little bit later, with a more strong focus, the discussion started on open data again, with the focus on reuse of data that was resulting from research based on public funding. And the whole idea of open data is that reuse should be promoted, but the criteria for data that can be reused have been articulated a bit more later in 2016 and are now these criteria for reusable data are now findability, accessibility, interoperability, and then again reusability. This is an important driver for all kinds of initiatives that are part of the and they are part of the agenda of organizations such as CLARIN. And I think it's important to keep in mind that open science, though it comes with specific demands and with certain requirements, it's not to be seen as a framework that is narrowing our opportunities, but it's calling for an open mind. Which also means that I think that some discussions, which are important, should always lead to seeing how the concerns and the practical limitations can be overcome. So one concern that is sometimes expressed is open science is calling for open access to data. However, and then there comes some concerns, among which the fact that not all data can be open, and that therefore open science cannot be imposed as a unified framework for all. Another concern comes from the observation that data and algorithms are surrounded by an aura of accuracy, objectivity, truth, but that values such as the democratic society, the rule of law, the epistemic and ethical impact concerns, etc., should also be taken into account. And of course, all these concerns have their truth, but they should not be the end of approaching open science as the way forward. I lost. Okay, because everybody sees open science and open data as not as the ultimate goal, but as a road that in itself is interesting and bringing all kinds of innovations and inspiration to the world of research. First of all, we all know that in certain domains, including the humanities, certain data sets cannot be open to anyone without any restrictions. Well, this can be organized, and that's being done also in CLARIN. And we also know that the principles of responsible data science have to be taken into account, because data is not a type of, is not just a digital object, but it is something that comes with a history, that has a context with all kinds of elements of diversity. And one of these diversity elements is Europe's, especially in Europe, is the multilinguality, which is actually an asset for the world that we are working in, because if we pay attention to multilinguality or linguistic diversity, it will help us to understand the dynamics around identity, the dynamics in culture and society. It helps us to understand the diversity across boundaries and regions. So it's actually a very fruitful starting point for all kinds of comparative studies. So this leads me to the statement that language data is definitely a pillar for data science that is for the types of data science that have a potential for impact on society. So I said Europe's multilinguality is a very good basis for comparative research, and especially for the studying of phenomena that are reflected in language use. For example, migration patterns can be studied based on linguistic phenomena. Intellectual history can be studied taking into account dynamics in historical language. Language variation is a topic with a lot of implications for societal policies. The dynamics in mental health conditions and for example, speech pathology have very many implications for society, but they are reflected in language that people use and can therefore be studied based on language data. And the way democracy is organized and takes shape in Europe can be studied based on parliamentary discourse. To get back to the Open Science agenda, which is all about data reuse and data sharing and stimulating wider benefit from efforts in the creation of data sets. The attention for data reuse and sharing has a very important side effect, or maybe it could even be seen as a primary goal of data sharing, and that is that it stimulates a disciplinary collaboration. So it's good to look into disciplinary dynamics for the field that digital humanists are working in. In historical research, you can observe that from a fear of subjectivity, the field has moved into a deep interest into multi-perspectivity. And multi-perspectivity means that you can't conduct a research agenda as an individual researcher or team. You need to involve people that understand the sources of the other perspectives. So in history, you can see a growth of interest in multidisciplinarity. In linguistics, you can see a shift in attention from studying language proper as a linguistic system to studying language in context, which means that there is all kinds of attention for identity shaping, language variation, language as a vehicle for memories, language as facilitating dialogue, language as part of multimodal expressions. So again, a wide range of fields of studies that require the involvement of people with multiple disciplinary backgrounds. And in social sciences, which is not the focus of this conference, but there are many interesting overlaps with things going on in social sciences. But is a domain where you can see that the traditional instrument used by certain social sciences, namely survey data, can, because of the role of and the capacity of information technology, now be coupled to the study of interviews. So, to summarize, CLARIN is one of those research infrastructures that have embraced the principles of open science, and the fair data principles are part of that. So we are working on the promotion of sharing and use of data through sustainable data registries. They are all available in open access for research purposes. We support linguistic diversity. There's coverage of over 1,500 language data. There are tools for many, many languages, and there are resources for analyzing language in all modalities. The FAIR principles are adhered to through basically a common metadata framework for all the data sets that are integrated by CLARIN. We promote a responsible data science, and we see a role for ourselves in strengthening the infrastructural support for 500,000 of professional SSH researchers in Europe alone. I will now move to part 2, where I explain it in a bit more detail what CLARIN is and how it has organized its services. So quickly, most of you will know this by now, because I know that there has been a CLARIN Cafe on Tuesday, and several talks have addressed elements of CLARIN. But as an organization, CLARIN is one of the so-called ERICs. It has ERIC status since 2012 in the context of the S3 landscape. S3 is the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures in all domains, and it provides sustainable access for scholars in humanities and social sciences, but also other disciplines are relevant to digital language data in all modalities. And on top of data, access is provided to advanced tools for the discovery of data, exploration, exploitation, annotation, and analysis, irrespective of where the data are located, because it is a distributed data infrastructure. There is a single sign-on environment where the discovery and processing of data can start. And CLARIN also serves as an ecosystem for the exchange of knowledge. And for those of you who are interested, and it was already mentioned in the introduction, there is something like that is called the European Open Science Cloud, which is a European initiative to integrate all research infrastructural support for the academics and citizens in Europe in the European Open Science Cloud, in short EOSC, and some of the services of CLARIN are integrated in the EOSC portal. So CLARIN ERIC is an organization and is funded by its members. So it's an organization of members that are countries. 21 countries from Europe, including Italy, are full member. And there are also 3 observing countries, France, UK, and South Africa. And on top of that, there are some centers in other areas of the world, such as in Carnegie Mellon University in the USA. In total, there are 64 centers of which 24 are certified data centers, which means that there is an independent organization called Core Trust Seal that regularly assesses whether they comply with the rules for fair data registries. And in the CLARIN infrastructure, the various centers and registries take care of a wide range of data types. In particular, or in principle, all the data types that are relevant for whatever branch of digital humanities or humanities at large, or social sciences or cultural sciences. So I give a list here just to spark your imagination about how long this list could be. Some of these types will be just addressed in a minute. It's also good to see that there is a lot of diversity in within the communities of use. So it's, of course, starting from linguistics and philology, but also literary studies, media studies, speech therapy, history. Teachers can make use of CLARIN, and the general public, of course, is also one of the audiences that we try to cater for. The services come in many flavors. Well, I will not discuss them all. You can find them on the CLARIN website, but it's important to be aware of the fact that there is a thing called Virtual Language Observatory that can be the starting point. Sorry, that can be the starting point for all explorations. But researchers can also use the CLARIN infrastructure to deposit their data. This is all coming together in the services are all listed in the CLARIN portal. Another important service is the Language Resource Switchboard, which will help you to find the tools that can actually do something with your data set, given the fact that your data set will be in a specific language or in a specific modality or in a specific format. The Language Resource Switchboard is the matchmaker for helping you to find the tools that might be needed. There are virtual collections, there is a Q&A section, and there is a content search. Some of them I will discuss in a bit more detail, but first of all, I would like to once more underline that all the data in CLARIN is not owned by the central organization, but it's all sitting in the network of centers that forms CLARIN. So it's a distributed architecture with services spread all over Europe and even beyond. And a very important starting point for the service provision is the fact that the data all have harmonized metadata descriptions, which are harvested to enable the search and access from the central platform. The tools and data are interoperable with the eye of FAIR, with the aim to make sure that data collections can be combined and that tools from different sources can be changed to perform the kind of complex operations that are typical for work in the digital humanities. Because the language data is so layered, you're never ready with just one process or just one functionality. Here's an overview of what the centers offer. That's a bit too much detail, but it's good to be aware of the fact that all these centers are coupled to the identity federation that CLARIN also is. And of course, also that there is a commitment in all these centers to take care of all the items for a longer period. Here a slide that shows in a bit more detail how this metadata harvesting and harmonization play a role. So on the one hand, there are data sets in data repositories. They are described by metadata, and on the other end, there are tools available for the processing of language data. They too are described with metadata. And then there is the process where The harvested metadata is available at the central level so that you can do a search and let the language resource switchboard do its work to select the appropriate tool for your data set or tools, because there may be different things that you would like to do with your data. So to list it again, CLARIN can help you to find data sets, language data, via the Central Discovery Service. They're all open access facilities. There's a common metadata framework. There is information for reuse through license details. The language observatory is a facet search facility, so you can use facets for languages, for modalities, etc. The switchboard I already mentioned. There you can do content-based search across the center network. And also good to mention is the CLARIN Resource Families initiatives, which provides overviews of comparable data sets in multiple languages. And I will also give an example of the virtual collection registry, which is there to help you create sites and share content. Coherent sets of digital objects. And as you can see, this is all in adherence to the FAIR principles. So here you see the discovery service, a screen dump from the discovery service, in this case for the starting point for the overview that you get if you select via the facet search option for Italian language and a collection called TalkBank. So you can see what TalkBank has in terms of Italian data. Here you see what you get in result if you look for the collections from ERCC, which is collections hosted by URAC. Here you see an overview of what you get if you look for the collections of the Italian B Center ILC for CLARIN, or for the ALIM collection. And to clarify once more, CLARIN helps you to discover materials, but the resources stay where they are with the creators and owners. Here you see an example of what you might find in case you dive into the details of a collection. Here is an example of the kind of details that you can find in Cocoon, which is a collection of stories in multiple language variants to study peoples. This collection is created to start the variation in language use, spoken language use. And here you are helped with geographical information to see with a map that shows where interviews have been taken, so where people have been asked to tell a story. So, I mentioned before the CLARIN Resource Families initiative, which was meant to give information on which data sets for which topics are available in multiple languages. But it gives also families of lexical resources and tool families. Right now, there are some 12 corpora families, and I will discuss a few of them later on. So to start with, I will, you see here a screen dump from the CLARIN website. If you look for, under CLARIN Resource Families, if you look for computer-mediated communication corpora, this overview, which is longer because there are 16 of them, but tells you if there is a concordancer that you can use to dive into the data or whether the data set is available for download. Here you see an Italian resource from on on computer-mediated data. I mentioned the virtual collection registry, which is helping you to find coherent digital objects. So, for example, here you see an item for a shock webinar, which is a project that CLARIN collaborates with. It's about the objects related to this webinar, namely the slides and the recordings and the description of the event. And here you see a collection created with search terms face mask and influenza somewhere in May. If you want to study that collection again, or the result of that search again, a virtual collection can be created for it. Maybe good to mention again that CLARIN has integrated some of the services in the European Open Science Cloud portal, which is a place where discipline-specific services can be integrated. It's also a place where, through the VLO service, which is integrated in the EOSC portal, also Europeana news paper data is available. Part 3, the CLARIN Service Office for Digital Humanities work with the potential for societal impact. Some stories. The longest story I will have to shortcut a little bit because we're running out of time otherwise, but relates to an important CLARIN Resource Family parliamentary corpora. We've started to make sure that for all languages in Europe and from all parliaments, the available corpora use the same metadata standards and the same are also interoperable at the semantic level, so that they use the same annotation terminology, because we think that this is a very important language resource for Europe, and the multilinguality is on the one hand complicating life for people that want to study parliamentary dynamics in the European context, but it's also helping or very stimulating for a research agenda that takes parliamentary data into account. So the benefits here is that if this is well done, it fuels multidisciplinary research, comparative analysis across time and across languages and countries and regions can take place. It is an important facility to make sure that in the public debate, the relevant information is available. Journalists could make use of it, for example. So in a way, we see that if this resource is of high quality, then it supports the effective functioning of democratic systems. And one of the recent activities we started is to make sure that there is a subset of the parliamentary corpora that is specifically curated with attention for the debates about COVID, so that if we want to start studying the recent history on the basis of parliamentary debates, this can easily be done because interoperability has been guaranteed. This is a quite diverse resource family in terms of size and coverage, but right now 25 European national parliaments have been incorporated, and also the European Parliament proceedings for 21 languages are present in this resource family. And then you can, this is just one item where you see again the possibility to check whether it can be downloaded or whether you need a concordancer to go into the details of such a corpus. Encoding of parliamentary data requires several steps to be taken in order to be able to create the full workflow that is illustrated here below. So from data collection data preparation, pre-processing, organization, and then topic modeling and visualization of topics, for example. These are all the steps that are paid attention to in the initiative towards the creation of this resource family. It is there, but it's still being worked on because there's always gaps and languages to be added. Gaps to be filled and languages to be added. It's good to show that metadata can already tell a story. So for example, here you can, based on the annotation levels that we promote, you see a result of visualization of how the parliamentarians in Germany with different political background have divided the speaking time over the various periods. Just one type of visualization that you could try and take as a starting point for further study. Here, a visualization of the characteristics of nouns. Yeah, this takes too long to explain, but here you see a visualization of the representation of females and non-female speeches in Danish Parliament. This was the starting point for an in-depth study about the role of women in various parties in Danish Parliament, the speaking time of female ministers and spokespersons, etc., which is an interesting starting point for the diversity of speaking styles in Parliament, and that can of course be coupled to all kinds of other elements in the or other data sets in the public realm, such as newspapers. I don't go into details here, but in my slides will be, and I will make them available, will be an overview of activities and publications for everything related to parliamentary data. Going back to another type of resource family, again, the CMC corpora from Italy are shown here. And again, their potential for societal or economic impact, because these corpora, Facebook comments or Italian web text, they can be used to inform education policy and other societal policies. For people interested in material that can play a role in language learning, I list here the elements from the resource family with learner corpora. And of course, language learning and language teaching are definitely among one of the pillars of societal impact from the humanities. So CLARIN is not just providing access to data, but also organizing, or is also organizing all kinds of things, and has an agenda that is aimed at the promotion of data harmonization and methodology development. Again, I can list here the activities related to the resource families, but are also the twin talks that we organize at the H events, where multidisciplinary methodology is put in focus, and the obstacles there. We organized a hackathon on the detection of misinformation on social media related to COVID, which may lead to an enrichment of the data sets for that topic. We coordinate and support collaborative work with potential for societal impact specifically. So for example, workshops and webinars aimed at a support chain for oral history data, which is a very important instrument for giving voice to minorities. And there's also the work on speech disorders that is important for informing work on speech pathology and the early signaling of Alzheimer's disease. What we also do is putting in focus the work done in the national consortia and centers, because we think that this is not just only informative about what people are doing, but it's also pointing others to what can be done if you start from the data offer in research infrastructure such as CLARIN. So we highlight there the consortium and a specific resource, a specific tool, specific event, and a specific researcher. And you find here a link to the chapter that was generated for the Italian consortium last year. And then some concluding remarks. I think it's good to underline once more that in the CLARIN infrastructure, everything is about interoperability, which is one of the important principles of the open science agenda, which is an important accelerator for multidisciplinary work. And I wanted to highlight here in this slide the kind of collaboration that we have with other initiatives in the social science and humanities. As I said before, there are many data types that are interesting both from the perspective of social sciences and from the perspective of humanities with a language character. Survey data, social media data, psychology data, cultural heritage data, etc. We do this, we stimulate this multidisciplinary work in collaboration with the other SSH research infrastructure. Some of you may know, CESDA for social sciences, DARIA, SHARE, ESS, and ARIES. We are all involved in collaborative projects aimed at better service alignment, notably the project SHOCK, aimed at creation of an SSH open cloud that could be integrated in the European Open Science Cloud, and TRIPLE. And as I said, we organize twin talks at DH events to stimulate the development of multidisciplinary agendas and to also reflect on where the obstacles are and how they could be overcome. In all this work, it is important, if you want to stimulate people to take up and to contribute to an infrastructure such as CLARIN, that they are aware of the dynamics in research assessment, because if your work is not just leading to journal publications, but has other outputs, it's important that your funder or your employer recognizes this work. I think it's good to mention the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment here, which is undescribed by 2,000 organizations and which was signed 600 times by organizations and individuals from Italy. So this DORA declaration aims to promote attention for publications in other channels than journals, for data publications and software development, I should have added here, for multilinguality in publishing, and for impact beyond research. So this is in place even if your own employer or funder has not yet discovered it. This will definitely start influence or continue to influence the careers of researchers in the near future. Here's an overview of links that you might find interesting on the CLARIN website. So an overview of previous events with recordings and slides, etc., that might be of interest to you. There is the option for funding of mobility. Right now, not the first thing you may be planning, but let's hope that soon you can start making plans again for projects and exchange of information and training, etc. So look for the ways we can help you in recovering the funds that are, or the budget that are required for that. There is a monthly newsletter that I suppose you've been pointing to already when you subscribed for this event. We have a channel that could be used for teaching and training. We hope to have a more structured web section for that topic soon, but already we have lectures, and we participate in the DH Courts Registry, which is being maintained by CLARIN and Daria together. And I would like to announce to you the next annual conference, which will take place in September. More details will be published soon, and you might be interested in hearing that the PC chair of this year will be Monica Monachini. I think it's time to stop here and leave the reflection to you, but of course I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francisca, for your very interesting speech. And I saw in the chat that there were a lot of intervention, mostly about the FAIR principle and the licenses to use in order to put our data in official institutional repositories. So, and I particularly appreciate the underlining that you did about the silent protagonist of the digital humanist as the silent protagonist of this turning point. That in my opinion, should be less silent. He or she should now speak alive.